Let's do a case study on a client that's having difficulty managing a late propulsive bias. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right. It is Wednesday. That means that tomorrow is Thursday and I will see you at 6 a.m. on the Coffee and Coaches Conference call as usual. These calls have been great. Great group of people. We have our regular people and we get new people every week, so this is kind of exciting. They're great calls. I'm enjoying them. We go as long as we possibly can each call. So again, if you haven't joined in on those, please do try to make it because they've been very, very productive and very helpful for a lot of people. Okay, digging into today's Q&A. This is a call I did with Robert. And Robert has a client case that we went through where we sort of strategized how to deal with a situation where we have a client that's biased towards late propulsion. They're having some issues associated with that. How do we bring them out of that? So we talked programming and strategy. We talked about management of activities, which is always a tough call. It's like, what do I take away? What do I still allow your clients to do? So we talked a little bit about that. And we even got into some foot management stuff associated with bunions at the end of the call. I've had a couple calls on bunions, so I'm going to try to put together one of these Q&As that's specifically about that. So that should be upcoming. I can't tell you exactly when because it's going to require a little bit of editing on my part, and I am not technically skilled, even though it seems like I do such a fabulous job on these calls. Anyway, enjoy this call. Post your questions. Go to askbillhartman@gmail.com if you have any questions or you would like to participate in a 15-minute consultation. So again, askbillhartman@gmail.com, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., Coffee and Coaches Conference call. Have a great day. Recording. Robert, what is your question?
So I've got a client that presents quite similarly to a photo that you put up in one of the IFAST University calls.
Okay.
It was a photo from Ireland. I don't know if you remember it, and it was a guy that had quite a lot of concentric orientation in his left hamstring and quite a late propulsive left foot.
Gotcha.
And I've got a client that's kind of similar presentation, but and the goal is trying to reduce the kind of stiffness and tightness in the left hamstring. And they're really sort of struggling to get around that and move on from that sort of problem at the moment. So I wonder if there's anything that you could help with that.
Okay, so let's talk about where his representation is now.
Yeah.
And from a strategy standpoint, I think there's a couple of things that we could probably do based on that. Okay, so you said it was left side.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I am in a late propulsive strategy on this side of the pelvis, what that means is that I'm going to be turning the sacrum away, right? So it's going to try to turn the sacrum to the right. So I'm going to push from behind here, and it's going to turn the sacrum this way, all right? So what would be happening is that the center of gravity is traveling forward over the foot, right? Now, chances are when he's standing still, his heel's still on the ground, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, but he's oriented as if he's trying to lift his heel from the ground.
Okay. Yeah.
So what I have here is a situation where I have a lot of concentric orientation here. I'll be concentrically oriented all the way down the extremity because I'm trying to propel myself forward. I'm trying to get my center of gravity forward and my heel up. So what I have is a constant state of load on that extremity. Because the load is instantaneous, the connective tissues of the foot, the lower leg, and the pelvis are all going to be in an overcoming state. So that's a very stiff representation of connective tissues. Now, it would be really nice if I could just reel that in, but I don't think that's the easiest way to do that with this type of a person. So what we can do is we can take him to a place where we still have concentric orientation of the same musculature, but we have a different load on the connective tissue. So we can actually reduce the rate of loading on the connective tissues by moving him all the way back to an early propulsive strategy. So when we talk about this kind of a thing, we're talking about the heels elevated element, because what that does is it takes a foot. I'm going to use a foot here real quick.
Yeah.
It takes a foot and it moves it into this early propulsive representation. So the difference between the late and the early, it looks very much the same. So if I tip up the late here and I tip up the early, it looks very similar. But the difference is that I'm getting the elongation of connective tissues. So this is anything that is not contractile tissue, including the skeleton. So I get this resilience returning to the connective tissues where they can expand and actually start to store energy. Because right now, all you have is a perpetual state of load, and we have to reduce that. Okay. So again, we start to move him back. So, and again, using just a simple representation of that, we would use like the heels elevated squat concept. We would use, if we're doing like a split squat, you've got a front foot elevated split squat, but I would do a heels elevated split squat under those circumstances, because if I can bias the foot towards early, I'm going to bias the entire system towards that delay strategy on the affected side. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, so let's just talk programming here.
Okay. Yeah.
So under most circumstances, I gotta create the delay. I gotta slow the left side down. So under those circumstances, I'm going to want to shift my center of gravity backwards towards that left heel. So think about all the other activities that you could probably do in the gym that would do this. Now, I want to reduce the loading strategy on that left side as well. So this is where anything where I'm pulling a cable downward is going to actually unweight me. So think about if I was in a staggered stance, so right foot forward, left foot back, and I was doing a cable chop towards that left side. Well, that shifts me backwards, but because I'm pulling a weight down, the weight is pulling me off the ground in that direction. So it actually unweights me and makes it a lot easier to reduce the connective tissue load. And now I can actually recapture that yielding action a whole lot easier. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So again, from a strategy standpoint, I think there's a lot of things that you can do here. He can still train, but you've got to start to think about, okay, what is the rate that I'm loading this in? If he is pushed towards any element of this overcoming action of the connective tissues, you're gonna be fighting a battle that you can't win. You've got to start to move him back. You started creating delay strategies.
That takes kind of, at the moment, things like running and that kind of stuff out of the equation a little bit, right? Because
I'm afraid so. Yeah. I'm afraid so. But again, it's not that he can't train. It's just that he may not be able to do some of the things that he enjoys more, which is an unfortunate circumstance. Now, having said that, the way that I tend to address these things, unless it's overt interference. So if you got like a marathoner that does like really heavy mileage, right? I tend to not take things away from people unless it's obvious. And like I said, it's got to be this overt interference. So it's like, like somebody that's got upper back compression and they want to do back squats. It's like, okay, we got to take that one kind of off the table, because that's pure interference, right? But it's like I said, if he wants to do like a different type of running under certain circumstances. So, when I have a distance runner that's breaking back into a running progression, we'll have them do tempo runs on grass or something along those lines that changes the surface and then changes the pace. So they load their tissues a little bit differently, right? So that might be a useful strategy for you. Maybe the conditioning becomes some element of something that would put us in sort of an early propulsive foot position. So like a backwards sled drag or something like that. That's an early propulsive strategy. But again, it's kind of conditioning oriented, not running, of course, but like I said, you might have to limit those things. Okay,
cool. And then like pre sort of training, if there was going to be any running going on, is it sort of a good idea to try and use some of those types of activities prior to running to get a bit more of a
Absolutely. Yeah. So think about it. It's like, okay, if I can create any element of this yielding action, then that's where I'm going to sort of initiate the programming, so they at least start in a good state.
Yeah.
And again, maybe you capture enough of it that, okay, all we have to do is sort of just back you off and then ramp you back up, utilizing these new activities to actually maintain this connective tissue behavior that we need.
Okay, great stuff. Yeah, and suppose there's a little bit of a follow-on from that. So, kind of one of those clients that actually, when he's training, the movements they look pretty good, right? So, a slightly different point, but there are clients out there that sort of hide compensations quite well, if you like, or better than others anyway. Is that a fair thing to say? I was just wondering if that's the case, it's certainly in a scenario where we might be doing more digital type sessions and that kind of stuff. If that's the case, then is there any strategies that you might use because you can't necessarily do sort of checks and balances with those kind of clients before and after, or you can, but yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So we understand that as people move through space, that they're going to go through expansion, compression, and expansion strategies, right? So what we want to do is we want to have a representation of what that actually looks like. And so because we're short on time, I'm just going to direct you to a few things on the YouTube channel. So go through some of the breakdowns. So I did a pretty extensive half kneeling video, I recall. We've done a bunch of split stance activities. So from those, what you should be able to capture is that there's a certain place where I'm going to be biased towards expansion and external rotation. There's a certain place where I'm going to be biased towards internal rotation and compressive strategies. And they do have a representation. There's a visual representation of those. And so you start to take that concept and apply it to your coach's eye. And then you can start to say, oh, okay, so when I see somebody go into a split squat and I see that one hip higher than the other, I know that they're not acquiring internal rotation. So what I need to do then is within my program, I need to make sure that I'm selecting an activity that captures internal rotation in that position. So now you make modifications to ipsilateral versus contralateral loading, elevation of the foot, elevation of the rear foot, right? Do I need to move you off the imaginary sagittal plane and start to move you from side to side more, right? So there's a difference between doing a backward sled drag and doing a crossover sled drag, right? So under those circumstances, those are for different pelvic orientations. So I have to take that into consideration as well. So again, it's like, if you understand where these external rotations and internal rotations are supposed to show up, I think there's a lot of things that you can do. It takes practice. You're going to make mistakes. Yeah. I make mistakes too.
Yeah.
It's okay. Don't hurt people. Always do safe experiments, right? But that's how you're going to figure this out. It's like, okay, there's a representation that I think is going on. I'm going to apply an intervention, and then we're going to see what happens. So if you do something correctly, in many cases, if they've got the adaptability available, they should change very, very quickly, that you can actually see the difference in the before and the after. So you always want to have something as your comparator. So when we do these complex movements, they're very, very good because you can see when it gets better, right?
Yeah.
You just got to have a representation of what you're looking at, what it means to you, and then apply an intervention and see what happens. That is an appropriate trial and error, and safe experimentation is very scientific. You're allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's the job most of the time.
Well, it is, but underappreciated. Everybody thinks that there is a way, and there are many ways, right? We just need to understand what our intentions are, and then have like I said, a key performance indicator to let you know when you're making the right selection.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. How are we good for time, or will we go?
Oh, let me see. You got 2.5 minutes. You got something quick?
2.5 minutes. Back to that sort of first client, he presents with a little bit of the sort of the bunions on the foot as well, that are kind of pointing him in the direction he wants to go, kind of thing.
Understood. Yeah. Yes.
I was wondering if you worked hard enough around that, would you expect that to change at all, or is that kind of like cemented in now?
So the answer to that question is it depends. So those things can progress to the point where they're not very changeable, other than with a surgical intervention. Within a certain range, again, it depends on how much change there's been, that you can make changes, right? Because again, some of these orientations are just bony, and bones do move. Bones change shape. So, I'll have certain types of feet that will come in, and people say, well, I've had this foot for a long time, but they've got enough adaptability. You've got to provide the right influence. So what you're looking at, just so you have an understanding of what you're looking at, that bunion evolution is internal rotation of that first ray of the foot, and it creates a twist right at the MTP joint. Okay. Oftentimes you'll see the same twist at the knee, or you'll see the same twist at the pelvis. You won't make a change if you only concentrate on one part of the body.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got to consider all of those top down influences as well. So make sure that you're capturing your foot cues. If you have a situation that if the arch is low, you're going to have to do something that might provide an arch. And so maybe that's selecting a type of shoe. Maybe it's an orthotic situation, or if you have an athletic trainer handy, they can do some tapings to test run it for you, which is always a great way to find out if you need to make a foot change there. Right. So again, it's going to depend on the actual representation that you're looking at. But in most cases, you're looking at somebody that's trying to drive internal rotation very aggressively, which means that they're missing it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So now you've got a situation where, okay, I need to capture my external rotation so I can have a bigger space to acquire my internal rotation, and then take it away so the foot doesn't have to be the compensation strategy. Right. But I think that we go back to the beginning of this conversation. It's like, okay, where am I going to capture that first? I think you take these people back to this early propulsive strategy. And again, maybe make a shoe modification or an orthotic situation along with that. And I think that's where you're going to start.
Great stuff. Appreciate it. Thanks very much, Bill.
Well, you're very welcome. I appreciate you. Thanks for participating. I appreciate it.
Cool. Hopefully the university call. I'll catch you on the next iFast University call.
Oh, okay. Excellent. We'll see you there.
Will.